Since joining the church and starting theological education at the graduate level, a lot of people have asked me how being under the autistic umbrella has gone into play with that. Specifically, people have asked me, what is it like to be on the autism spectrum and be so involved with the church? Well, I think that in order to adequately answer that, it's important to back up a bit. I started my religious life as an Orthodox Jew, and in some ways, one might say that that's the autistic person's or introvert's haven, because so much of the religion relies so heavily on text study, and a lot of that can be done individually or one-on-one with another zealous Jew or rabbi, as opposed to such large groups. And religious rituals within the Jewish community, with the exception of maybe some synagogue visits, which to some degree are mandatory, can also be practiced at home. Shabbat dinner can be carried out between a husband and wife or two best friends. It isn't entirely mandatory to be in a large religious body to participate in a Sabbath meal or other rituals. On the other hand, another form of the Sabbath meal, or the Eucharist as it's called in the church, requires being in the religious body because only the ordained can consecrate the sacrament. This took a lot of getting used to because since I am on the autism spectrum, I am very slow at reading social cues and had to pretty much figure out Christianity for myself. I didn't have anyone to sit with me during services, so things like when to get up, when to bow, when to sit down, when to go forward to communion might have seemed super obvious to the normal person, but it made absolutely no sense to me. Even priests at the altar rail, at one point in time, have had to tell me when to come forward, when to accept the bread and wine, and so forth. And some people have even said, well, that's just because you're new. Yeah, maybe, to some degree, but generally in my life, since I am on the autism spectrum, the skills that people know naturally or instinctively, I had to be taught. Natural social skills, or the natural social communication norms, make absolutely no sense to me. For example, in college, I didn't know that it was considered odd to say hi to someone at a coffee shop and then promptly sit down and tell them my life story. It wasn't until my roommate pointed out to me and explained to me that doing that is actually kind of weird, and then when she told me about this, I began to understand. My disability advisor in undergrad also had to tell me at one point, Adele, you really need to learn to make eye contact with people instead of going like this every time you have a conversation with someone. There are a lot of autistic folks who really struggle with that, myself included. And when you talk to me, I might appear to be really good at it, but I've had to train myself to do it, and it's a constant struggle. Sometimes I abnormally make eye contact with folks throughout the entire conversation when I'm sitting with them, whereas most normal people look away at least once or twice in a normal interaction. Generally, though, a lot of times I will make eye contact with the entire conversation simply because inside my head I'm saying to myself, okay, make eye contact with this person the entire time. And I might not always catch what the person is saying because I have to force myself to concentrate on not letting my eyes wander, which makes normal things in the church, like a coffee hour, really hard for me. Those general social cues are not natural for a person like me, and in fact, sometimes I really do have a hard time understanding or sensing these things at all. These things that come naturally to normal people, but since I don't really know what normal was, I've always had to be taught. And you can probably imagine my confusion when, during communion, the first times I went to church and everyone was suddenly walking up to the front of the sanctuary, I was like, okay, what's going on? And the next question I get a lot is, how are you different today, and how does that affect your new life in the church? Well, the most obvious thing I can think of is the social disconnect. Most people, once they know me for a while, can tell that there's something different and that I'm a little bit weird, and I think that that almost repels them. Since I don't subscribe to social norms in a typical sense, I don't always realize that most people in this world aren't always honest and very forthright because our society seems to have this OMG, I don't want to offend anyone, so I'm not going to say anything about anything. And as a result, since I am so forthright and honest to the point of bluntness to people, that's repelling. And since it repels other people, it also repels me from them because I'm the only person I live as. I seem normal to myself. And so to me, it's everybody else that's weird. But anyway, the other question I get asked a lot is, so what's up with this infamous other world that some autistic folks have? Well, this isn't just autistic people, it's kind of all introverts, and a lot of autistic people are introverts, but I have to mask it with something else. I have inner dialogue going on the whole time. And so, for me, I have to mask this with something that seems normal. And luckily for me, I'm at a religious institution, so it's not uncommon for people to be praying in the common student area, so I can kind of mask my inner dialogue by praying. As far as outside of school and being in a sacred place, sometimes I go on long walks with myself. I walk the dog. Sometimes I will say what I'm thinking in my head to my dog. So then it doesn't feel like I'm really talking to myself even if I am. The other thing I'll do is sometimes just get on the internet mindlessly for hours and sometimes annoy friends with my repetitive thoughts because to me, it's hard to visualize the other person sitting at the other end of the computer. So for me, those people end up more just hearing my thought process all the time. And, sometimes when it comes to the internet, you don't really have to think a lot to do that. But at the same time, sometimes being different isn't always bad because you have such a different perspective on life than what normal people have. Especially since some autistic people are such excellent observers. And sometimes it's hard to realize that because the lack of social connections makes it hard for one to get past potentially offending others or being offended. But at the same time, having this different life experience can be good because you say, I'm a college graduate and can function as a fairly normal person. So, I guess in the long run, it's not that bad because if you think about it, people like Einstein were different. I think now scholars are saying Mozart was dyslexic. So, I guess, I'm no Mozart or Einstein or Freud or any of those people, but sometimes it's kind of cool to be like, well, maybe I could be one of those people. Probably not, but I guess it's kind of cool to maybe sort of not really be in that category. But anyway, I wasn't so sure what exactly people are wanting, and I've had a lot of questions, so I thought that maybe putting this out there for my friends, most of which are on here, would just be a way to kind of answer people's questions in like a mass sort of way. So, if you have any more questions, you can ask and maybe I can address them here. Thank you.